as I explore the Appalachian Mountains to see if I can uncover the truth behind the chilling Skinwalker legends. Skinwalkers, the very term sends shivers down the spine of many Native Americans, and with good reason. These supernatural beings are woven deep into the fabric of folklore, particularly in the Appalachian Mountains, where the veil between reality and myth seems to blur. According to legend, Skinwalkers are witches who've mastered the art of shape-shifting, taking on various forms to wreak havoc on unsuspecting communities. There's no denying the eerie aura surrounding Skinwalkers. Many claim they're mere myth, conjured up to explain the unexplained, while others swear they've encountered these malevolent entities firsthand. The skepticism surrounding Skinwalkers is palpable, but it's this uncertainty that fuels the fear. It's a fear that permeates the cultural identity of the Appalachian region, where the line between fact and fiction is constantly blurred. You see, in these parts, legends are woven into the very fabric of daily life, and the Skinwalker is no exception. Their presence is felt in every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, and every unexplained occurrence that sends shivers down the spine. This fear is further amplified by the stories of Skinwalkers that have been passed down through generations. Locals will tell you of strange creatures lurking in the shadows, of livestock mutilated under the cover of darkness, and of unexplained howls that echo through the mountains. It's these stories that have shaped the cultural narrative of the Appalachian region, where the Skinwalker has become an embodiment of the unknown, the feared, and the supernatural. The connection between these tales and the natural landscape is undeniable. The Appalachian Mountains, with their twisted trees and treacherous terrain, provide the perfect backdrop for these spine-tingling stories to unfold. In these mountains, the air is thick with an aura of mystique, and it's here that the Skinwalker legends take on a life of their own. The stories are endless, of people encountering glowing eyes in the dark, of hearing disembodied voices on the wind, and of feeling an unseen presence lurking just out of sight. It's these stories that keep people up at night, wondering if the Skinwalkers are more than just mere myth. You see, in these parts, the supernatural is woven into the very fabric of everyday life, and the Skinwalker is the embodiment of that fear. I've spoken to locals who've encountered these creatures firsthand, and their stories send shivers down the spine. There's the tale of a hunter who stumbled upon a creature with glowing eyes, its presence seeming to draw the life out of him. There's the story of a family who woke up to find their livestock mutilated, the only clue being a set of unexplained tracks leading into the forest. These stories are etched into the collective memory of the Appalachian region, where the Skinwalker has become a symbol of fear, of the unknown, and of the supernatural. One story in particular stands out, that of a woman who claimed to have been followed by a Skinwalker through the forest. She spoke of feeling an unseen presence, of hearing her name being called out on the wind, and of seeing a figure lurking just out of sight. Her story is a testament to the fear that pervades this region, a fear that's rooted deep in the cultural psyche. It's a fear that's hard to shake, a fear that lingers long after the lights have gone out and the fire has died down. So, what's the truth behind these Skinwalker legends? Is it mere myth? Or is there something more sinister lurking in the shadows? One thing's for certain. The Appalachian Mountains hold secrets. Secrets that only begin to unravel when the sun dips below the horizon and the fireflies start to twinkle. Recap time. We've delved into the world of Skinwalker legends, exploring the fear and mystique that surrounds surrounds these supernatural beings. From their roots in Native American folklore to the eerie stories of locals, it's clear that the Skinwalker has left an indelible mark on the cultural identity of the Appalachian region. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the heart of Skinwalker country. If you've got a story to share or a thought to ponder, let me know in the comments below. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more videos on legends, folklore, and the supernatural. Part 1. The Shadow of a Whisper. The Appalachian Mountains have always felt old, haunted by secrets whispered among ancient trees and winding rivers. But my family raised among those slopes and dense forests never truly feared them, at least not until we learned to be careful. Stories about creatures lurking in the woods were part of our folklore, sure, but one name stood out above all: Skinwalkers. To most folks, they're merely legends, fears spun round campfires to keep kids from wandering off alone. But here, in these mountains, Skinwalkers are real enough that even the hardest skeptics start locking their doors before sundown. We never actually seen one, but my grandmother used to say, "It's the ones you asterisk don't asterisk see that you should fear." She had a sort of sixth sense for things like that. The few times we'd be walking out in the woods and she'd get a chill, she'd stop dead and just listen, so quiet you could hear her heartbeat if you got close enough. And then she'd say, "It's time to go back now." My cousins and I would protest, of course, begging for just a few more minutes, but she'd grab us by the shoulders, her eyes dark and serious. "It's back," she'd say, her voice barely a whisper. She never had to explain. We'd seen enough to know she wasn't talking about any forest animal. Years went by, and the story started feeling like any other creepy legend meant to scare us. That was until the summer my friend Toby disappeared. Toby was from out of town, a city kid staying with his aunt and uncle for a few weeks. He was fascinated by the mountains, always wanting to explore the places I'd been told to avoid. One night, we found ourselves near one of the old trails, a path my grandmother had strictly forbidden us from following. Toby dared me to go down with him, just a little ways. I hesitated, but there was that unspoken rule between us kids: whoever chickened out first would never hear the end of it. So, down the trail we went. The trees were denser there, the kind that blocked out the moonlight and muffled the sounds around you. After only a few minutes, I felt something in the air change. The silence wasn't the usual peaceful hush. It was thick and cold, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Toby was still grinning, oblivious, when we heard a soft, snapping twig up ahead. It was just a deer, I told myself. But when the snap happened again, closer this time, it felt wrong. A shadow flickered between the trees, tall, lean, something that moved too fluidly to be human, yet not quite animal. Toby hadn't noticed it yet, but I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, an instinct screaming to turn back. I grabbed his arm, but he shook me off, laughing under his breath. The shadow stopped moving, still as a statue, watching us. Toby finally noticed it too. His laugh died, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed silence. We couldn't see its face, but we felt it staring. The moment stretched, endless and suffocating, as we stood frozen, watching the shadow watch us. I couldn't quite make out the figure's shape, but I sensed it shifting subtly, as though it was trying on different forms, different faces, to find the one that would frighten us the most. Toby was finally silent, his usual cockiness gone. replaced by something bordering on fear. The figure took a step forward, and then another, each movement eerily quiet, almost gliding over the forest floor. I don't know why I hadn't run yet, why my legs felt glued to the spot, but something about the way it moved kept me still, like it had woven an invisible thread around us. But then it spoke, or rather, it made a sound that almost sounded like a voice of scratchy, distorted mimicry, like it was repeating words it had overheard once, but didn't understand. "Come closer," it rasped, its tone hollow, empty, yet somehow familiar. Toby's eyes darted to me, and I could see he was trying to summon the courage to laugh it off, but his bravado was gone. He took a half step back, his gaze flickering over to the way we come. The creature mimicked his movement, almost playfully, taking a step backward as if to mirror Toby. My mind was screaming to run, to get out, but my body wouldn't listen. I could only watch, heart thudding against my ribs like a hammer. And then, it shifted again, its form blurring at the edges before settling into something even more disturbing. It looked like Toby, not exactly, more like an impression of him, something put together from memory, but without the right details. Its eyes were too dark, its smile too wide, stretching its mouth into something too long, too thin. It tilted its head and whispered in that same gravelly voice, "Come closer." Toby's face drained of all color, his breath coming in shallow gasps. I managed to break my paralysis long enough to grab his arm, pulling him backward, inch by inch. The creature's face morphed again, its skin stretching and reshaping like wet clay, taking on hints of my face now, parts of other people I thought I recognized but couldn't place. It leaned closer, the shape of its head warping and twisting with every step. I finally forced out a strangled whisper, "Toby, we need to go now." He nodded, his eyes locked on the creature as if he couldn't look away. We took a slow step back, then another, and the creature followed, matching us with each step, its face continuing to change, shifting between faces we knew, faces we'd never seen before, and faces that felt disturbingly close to home. Just when we thought we might get away, it said, in that strange, fractured voice, "You don't belong here." And that's when Toby lost it. He turned and ran, breaking through the branches and over the roots, his feet thudding against the dirt as he sprinted blindly through the dark forest. I didn't hesitate, running after him as fast as I could. Behind us, the creature let out a low, guttural laugh, a sound that echoed through the trees, chasing us as we stumbled along the path. And then, something strange happened. The forest, usually so familiar, seemed to shift around us. Trees I didn't recognize loomed over us, branches twisted in patterns that felt wrong. The trail was gone, replaced by dense thickets that hadn't been there before. I kept running, desperate to keep up with Toby's frantic pace, when I heard him scream up ahead. It wasn't just fear, it was pure terror, the kind that hits a person at the core, leaving no room for rational thought. I pushed through the brush, branches scraping at my arms and face, until I saw him standing in a small clearing, staring at something just beyond the trees. It was another figure, standing deathly still, but this time, it was unmistakable. It was me. I froze, staring at my own doppelganger as it emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. It was me, down to the torn sleeve of my jacket and the bruise on my cheek from a fall I'd taken earlier. But the eyes it had my face, my even the nervous twitch of my head when I'm scared, but those eyes weren't mine. They were dark, hollow pits, wide and blank, as if they were just holes carved into the face. The creature wore an expression that should have been familiar, but it twisted my features into something unsettlingly hungry. Its mouth opened slightly, stretching far too wide for a human jaw, revealing rows of teeth that were wrong to many, too sharp. It tilted its head, watching me with a detached curiosity, like a cat toying with a mouse. Toby stumbled backward, his breaths coming fast and shallow, a look of horror fixed on his face. He shot a panicked glance at me, as if trying to confirm that I was real, that I was still me. I felt the urge to say something, to reassure him, but my voice caught in my throat, and as I stared at the doppelganger, it began to move forward, step by step, mirroring me with an eerie grace, as if every movement I made was a dance. Stay away, I managed to whisper, though it was barely audible, even to myself. The creature smirked, the corners of its mouth pulling back in a grotesque grin that stretched far too wide, revealing teeth that seemed to glisten in the pale moonlight filtering through the trees. I saw Toby's hands clenching into fists as he backed away further, his wide, frightened eyes darting between me and the creature that wore my face. And then, in that same broken voice, it said, "Why are you here?" The voice sounded garbled, as if it was learning to speak, each word twisting painfully out of its mouth. It sounded almost sad, a fragile mimicry of human speech, but it only added to the horror. Every instinct I had told me to run, to leave this place, and never look back. But there was no clear path out the forest that shifted around us, the familiar trail vanishing into thick trees and underbrush. Toby whispered, What is that thing?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. But the truth was, I did know. I had heard about skinwalkers my whole life. My grandmother had warned me, had drilled it into me never to wander off the trail, never to look too deep into the shadows. But now, standing face to face with this thing, I realized how little I truly understood about the stories. The creature's face twisted again, and suddenly, it looked like Toby, his exact features, but wrong in subtle ways. The skin was stretched tightly over the bones, the mouth slightly too wide, as if it had pulled his face like a mask over something monstrous. It grinned with Toby's face and repeated in that garbled, unnatural voice, "Why are you here?" The words echoed in the clearing, twisting around us, filling the air like a chant. It took another step forward, its form rippling and blurring, switching back to my own face, my own torn jacket and scraped cheek. I could feel Toby trembling beside me, his hand clutching my arm so tightly it hurt. But I didn't shake him off. We were too terrified to move, both of us rooted to the spot. Then, suddenly, it lunged. The movement was too fast, a blur of limbs and shadows. I only had a moment to react, shoving Toby to the side as I threw myself in the opposite direction. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath out of me. The creature's distorted, inhuman shriek filled the clearing as it missed its target, and I scrambled to my feet, dragging Toby with me as we stumbled backward. I didn't look back to see if it was following. We ran, darting between the trees, our footsteps crunching over leaves and snapping twigs, but it was too quiet. No sound of pursuit, no breaking branches, just silence, thick and unnatural, pressing in on us from all sides. Our feet pounded against the ground as we ran, lungs burning with each step, but it felt like we were going nowhere, like the forest was stretching out, keeping us trapped. I kept looking back, expecting to see that twisted version of myself or Toby lurking in the shadows. But all I saw was endless darkness, broken only by patches of faint moonlight. The silence wasn't a comfort, it was a warning, a whisper from the forest itself that something was terribly wrong. I could feel it like a presence, vast and looming, pressing in from all directions. Toby's hand was still gripping my arm, his fingers digging in so hard I could feel bruises forming. But I didn't let go. It was the only thing grounding me, the only proof I had that I wasn't completely alone. Finally, we stumbled to a stop, our breaths coming in ragged gasps, sweat trickling down our faces despite the cold. I scanned the area, trying to orient myself, but everything was unfamiliar. Trees seemed to close in around us, branches twisting overhead like skeletal fingers. I couldn't tell where we were, couldn't see the trail or any familiar landmarks. Do you think we lost it? Toby asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure. The hairs on the back of my neck were still standing, a primal instinct screaming that we weren't safe yet. I could still feel it, that presence lurking just beyond the edge of sight, hiding in the shadows, waiting for us to make a mistake. Toby, I whispered, we need to keep moving. I think it's trying to keep us lost. He nodded, swallowing hard, and we started walking again, this time slower, more cautious. Every sound, every rustling leaf made us jump, our eyes darting round, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. But the forest was too dark, the shadows too deep, and the silence too heavy. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, it was impossible to tell. And then, just as we started to think we might have a chance of finding our way back, we heard it again. A voice, but not just any voice. It was my grandmother's voice, soft and familiar, echoing through the trees. Lena, Toby, where are you? It called, the tone early calm, as if she was just calling us in for dinner. Toby froze, his face going pale. He turned to me, his eyes wide with disbelief. That's not possible, he whispered. She's not even here. You said she's been gone since last winter. I nodded, my throat tightening. My grandmother had passed away nearly a year ago, peacefully in her sleep, and I'd never told Toby much about her except in passing. But the voice was unmistakable, down to the slight rasp she had in her last few years. The voice called out again, closer this time, and I felt my stomach twist. It was like she was standing just behind the next tree, waiting for us to turn around, to look. It's not her, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. It's trying to trick us. Remember, they mimic, they take voices, faces. We can't listen to it. But Toby was already moving, his eyes glazed, his steps slow and unsteady. Lena, it sounds like her. What if it's really her? I grabbed his arm, digging my fingers in, desperate to hold him back. Toby, no. That's what it wants. It wants us to get close, to let it in. He hesitated, but the voice called out again, softer, more pleading. Please, help me. I'm lost. Toby's face twisted, a mix of longing and terror, and he shook his head. I can't. I have to see. He pulled away from me, stumbling toward the voice, as if in a trance. No, I hissed, shrugged me off, stepping deeper into the shadows. And that's when I saw it, something moving just beyond him, barely visible in the darkness. A figure, tall and thin, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes glowed faintly, an eerie yellow light piercing the dark, and I knew, with every ounce of instinct in me, that it was waiting. The thing stepped forward into a shaft of moonlight, and for a split second, I saw its face clearly. It was my grandmother's face, her features stretched and distorted, her mouth twisted into a smile that was too wide, too eager. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It raised one hand, beckoning us closer, fingers long and thin like talons. "Come closer," it whispered, in my grandmother's voice, the words smooth, almost sweet, but with a chill that sank into my bones. "Toby, stop," I yelled, panic overtaking me. But he was already too close, reaching out as if in a daze, his hand just inches from the creature's outstretched fingers. Then, with a sickening quickness, the creature's smile faded, replaced by a look of hunger. Its fingers snapped forward, clutching Toby's wrist in a grip so tight his skin went white. He gasped, his eyes widening in shock as he finally realized what was happening. But it was too late. "Lena," he choked out, his voice raw with terror. I didn't think. I couldn't. I launched myself forward, grabbing Toby's other arm, yanking with every bit of strength I had. For a moment, it was a tug of war, the creature's grip unyielding, its face twisted in that horrifying, empty smile. And then, suddenly, it let go, flinging Toby back into me with a force that sent us both crashing to the ground. We scrambled to our feet, stumbling backward, and I could see it watching us, its face a mask of fury, its mouth opening in a silent scream. And then, it faded back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had come. We didn't wait. We turned and ran, hearts pounding, the echo of my grandmother's voice trailing after us like a mocking laugh. And just when we thought we might escape, we heard it again. "Lena, Toby, come back." The voice echoed around us, wrapping around the trees, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. It had dropped the pretense of gentleness now. There was something furious in it, a scraping, grinding edge that made my skin crawl. And I realized, with a sudden jolt of fear, that the creature wasn't just mimicking my grandmother, it was taunting me, using her voice like a weapon. Toby and I kept running, barely able to see where we were going in the dark, branches tearing at our clothes, our faces. The forest seemed to twist around us, shifting with each step, making it impossible to find our way back to the trail. And all the while, the voice kept calling, growing louder, more frantic, as if the creature was losing patience. "We're not getting out, are we?" Toby gasped, his face pale, his eyes darting round. "It's keeping us here. Don't say that," I whispered, though I felt the same gnawing fear in the pit of my stomach. The thing could change its face, its voice, its form. Who's to say it couldn't change the forest around it, too? It had a hold on us, some pull that twisted our surroundings into a labyrinth we couldn't escape. The ground beneath us was slick with mud and dead leaves, and I almost slipped as I stumbled over a tree root. Toby caught my arm, pulling me up just in time, and I gave him a shaky nod of thanks. The fear in his eyes was mirrored in mine. We both knew that if we stopped moving, even for a second, it would catch up to us. But as we rounded a dense thicket, we saw something strange, a faint light, flickering through the trees This was warm, a golden glow, like firelight. I felt a surge of hope, thinking maybe, just maybe, it was a cabin or a campsite, somewhere safe, somewhere that creature couldn't reach. We pushed forward, hearts pounding, feet stumbling over rocks and roots as we followed the light. It grew brighter as we approached, casting long shadows across the trees. And for a moment, it felt like we might have actually found our way out. Then, we saw it. The light wasn't coming from a cabin, or a fire, or any kind of human shelter. It was coming from a circle of stones, ranged in a perfect ring on the forest floor, each stone glowing within a natural, flickering light. And in the center of the circle, something lay sprawled on the ground, motionless and twisted, its limbs splayed out at unnatural angles. Toby pulled back, a look of horror on his face. "Lena, what is that?" I swallowed hard, my gaze locked on the figure within the circle. It was a person, or what was left of one. Their skin was stretched tight over their bones, their mouth open in a silent scream, their eyes wide and blank, staring up at the sky. I couldn't tell if they were real or some kind of decayed effigy, something the creature had left here as a warning. "We need to leave," I whispered, taking a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. "Now." But as I turned to pull Toby away, the figure's head jerked toward us, its eyes locking onto mine. And then, in that same fractured, distorted voice, it spoke. "Lena, Toby," it rasped, each syllable a struggle, a grotesque mimicry of life. "Help me," Toby whimpered, his hand tightening around mine, but we didn't dare move. The thing in the circle kept staring at us, its mouth twisting into a grotesque, bleeding smile. Its voice was cracked and hollow, as if it hadn't spoken in years, and every word seemed to scrape against my ears like nails on a chalkboard. "Please, don't leave me here." It dragged itself forward, its fingers clawing at the ground, leaving trails of dark, sticky liquid on the stones. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat, but I couldn't look away. The thing was staring at us with an intensity that felt almost human, its eyes wide with a desperation that went beyond terror. It was like it was trapped, unable to leave the circle, and I felt a strange, horrible pity mingling with my fear. We can't just leave it," Toby whispered, his voice shaking. What if it's a person?" I shook my head, barely able to find my voice. "It's not, Toby. It's not. It's another trick. It wants us to get closer, to help it. But look at it, Lena. It looks like it's in pain." I swallowed hard, fighting against the part of me that wanted to believe him. I didn't want to get closer, didn't want to take even one step toward that thing, but Toby's grip on my hand was strong, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. The pity, the same pity I was feeling, and that's when I noticed something else. Round the edges of the stone circle, there were markings etched into the ground, strange symbols that looked as old as the mountains themselves. Symbols I'd seen once before in one of my grandmother's books, back when I'd been too young to understand what they meant. They were Lord's protective markings, meant to keep evil spirits from crossing. The thing wasn't trapped, it was contained. "Toby, don't you see?" I whispered, pulling him back. "It's not stuck here. Someone put it here. Someone kept it here asterisk on purpose." Asterisk keep linked, his eyes widening as the realization sank in. He looked back at the creature, at its bleeding eyes and twisted limbs, and his face went pale. The creature must have sensed our hesitation, because its expression changed, the desperation melting away into something darker. Its smile widened, its eyes narrowing, and its voice took on that mocking, distorted tone again. "Oh, don't go," it whispered, the sweetness replaced by a cold, mocking edge. "You came so far. Stay, just a little longer." The light in the stones began to flicker, the shadows around us growing darker, more oppressive, and the thing dragged itself closer to the edge of the circle, its mouth stretching into a grin that was too wide, too hungry. I pulled Toby back, the urgency kicking in again, a surge of adrenaline that left no room for doubt. "We have to go. Asterisk now. Asterisk." We turned and ran, the creature's laughter echoing behind us, a high, brittle sound that followed us through the trees.